We are now joined by ESPN's and new voice of the Boston Celtics, Drew Carter. I'm Jack Gordon. Drew, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Jack, it's great to see you, man. Thanks for having me on. I hope you guys are having a blast in Vegas, but getting some work done as well. And I just want to expose you to the listener. We're recording this via Zoom, and I had to troubleshoot your Zoom from the other side, and that's embarrassing for
Okay,
you because I'm the old guy here.
you're not wrong, but calling yourself the old guy as probably one of the youngest people in the NBA broadcasting games is, I don't know if you can say that, but I'll give it to you. I guess I gotta get on my Zoom technology. But
Yeah.
Drew, so we're on the Vegas trip this year. It wasn't too long ago that you were on the Super Bowl trip from Syracuse, and you went down to Atlanta, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, 2019 was the first time that students went down to Radio Row, and it was Atlanta. It was Rams Pats, one of the most boring Super Bowls ever. But as you know, and as I'm sure it's the same for you guys, we didn't actually stay for the game. We just went down there for Radio Row, and we did some radio every day. We filmed some stuff for Citrus TV, something for ACC Network, a bunch of stuff for social media, and it's crazy, man. I mean, you can't walk 3 feet on Radio Row without running into somebody you've watched or listened to for pretty much your entire life. I think that's one of the coolest parts about like being your age. Again, not to bring up the age thing, but being in college and like you grow up watching these people and all of a sudden you're doing a show next to them and they're coming on your show with you and it's really neat, especially with the Syracuse aspect because half the people broadcasting from Radio Row went to Syracuse. So if you wear enough orange, you're going to get a lot of really good guests just by default.
Right. I'm a walking advertisement today for the radio listeners that can't see a big old orange and white polo today. But Drew, I got to ask you, like you mentioned, everywhere here on Radio Row, you see new faces, athletes, broadcasters. Who were a couple of the people that you saw when, you're a college kid saying, holy cow, I just saw blank?
Yeah, every day is a little bit different, but because I'm such a nerd for broadcasting, it was pretty neat when Scott Hansen came on our show, and it looked like Annie interviewed him for you guys this year, and
Yep.
that was cool. But when he came on with us, he sat down at the table, and I just remember thinking, like, this is the most intense individual I've ever conversed with.
Yes.
Scott Hansen, for those who don't know, actually he played football at Syracuse. He was a long snapper. He's from Michigan, so he's a Midwest guy. I'm from Minnesota, so we kind of have that in common. And then he obviously does red zone, and he's an absolute maniac in the best way. Like he doesn't go to the bathroom for 7 hours, which I've never understood. I should have asked him. It's like you could get away with a few minutes of just going game to game without you narrating everything, but I guess he's just so committed to the bit at this point. But I remember interviewing him and feeling like he was staring into my soul every time we spoke because he's just that intense. And then Kevin Harlan came on too, and that was really neat. And then I mean, walking around, like Jerry Rice was there. I think Warren Sapp was there. A bunch of people from sports media, obviously. So it's just insane. I mean, it's like a total holy F moment. Basically, every minute you're there, you turn your head and you see a different celebrity.
Scott Hansen, I believe, WAER's first sideline reporter. I think he gained the
Oh,
trust of Coach Pasqualoni, I think, and allowed them to go on the sideline. So a trailblazer of sorts. And yeah, the bathroom thing, definitely just doing it for the premise, like you said, doing it for the bit.
yeah.
So
He
Drew,
doesn't
you did
have to do
something.
that. Annie should have told him. Sorry, Jack. Annie should have told him, like, hey,
No, you're
man, you're
good.
allowed to use the bathroom in a 7 hour span. It's okay.
A Navy SEAL trained platter, I suppose, for Mr. Hansen. So you did
Yeah.
something very unique this year in regards to football. You called a game in Andy's bedroom of Toy Story. What was that like for you?
That, Jack, was one of the coolest assignments I've ever gotten, and I think will probably be that way for the rest of my career. So for those who didn't see it, it was on ESPN Plus and Disney Plus, and I can wake up and say that in my sleep because I did so many promos for it, which was cool because ESPN and Disney really invested in it. And it was an alternate broadcast. It was a week 4 game, Jags Falcons in London. So it started at 9:30 Eastern time. So basically the idea was like we wanted to help a new generation, new fan base experience football in a different way. And so the cool thing about ESPN is it's owned by Disney, which also owns Pixar and Marvel and a bunch of different properties where you can do this pop culture stuff and it happens seamlessly. And so we did this game and it was animated in real time. The technology was insane, Jack. Like people, it was really cool for Booger McFarland and Pepper Persley and me to get the texts and the tweets, which I still call it. I'm never going to call it X. We get the tweets and all the cool messages like my son has never watched a football game and they haven't been able to, peel their eyes from the screen for this one. But the reality is like there are hundreds of people working on that show and they're the ones who really make it go. And like the player tracking technology and the animation, that stuff was out of control, cool. And then our job was to just show up and have fun. And what was really neat about it is, not to get like too philosophical about it, but I think when what we do, Jack, in talking about sports, I think there are some times where, at least for me personally, it's easy to be like, I talk about sports for a living. Like, what's the impact of that? Like there are people out there who do real important stuff, like teachers and doctors and philanthropists, and there's like a direct impact there. For us, talking about sports, it's a little bit harder to see that sometimes, but with that Toy Story broadcast and same thing going back to last March, we did a hockey game in the universe of a Disney Channel show called Big City Greens. And it was the same type of player tracking technology to animate it live. We saw a lot of really cool messages. And in that moment, it sort of felt like we were having an impact because we might get somebody to fall in love with sports like we love them. And that's, to me, like that's the good stuff. That's why you get into the business. And it was also just a lot of fun. I rewatched all the Toy Story and everything. So I'm like all in on Toy Story.
Yesterday, I talked to Nate Burleson about doing the Nickelodeon game, and he said the first time he did a Nick game, he was, describing guys running routes and the coverage in the secondary, and his producer told him, Nate, take a step back here. You got 5-year-olds watching the game. So how did you kind of prepare yourself for this game and not want it to be all X's and O's?
It's a really good question, dude, because ours was a little bit different from the Nickelodeon one. I think the Nickelodeon one was like the top line of the mission statement was we want kids to understand football and like football. And Nickelodeon was their avenue toward it. Ours was a little bit different. Toy Story, the first Toy Story movie came out in the 90s, so there are a lot of people who are my age or older who, I mean, if you can believe that, my age or older. I know that doesn't sound possible, but there are a lot of people who watch it for the nostalgia factor, who already know football, but there are also a lot of people who've never seen it before, and this is their entry to the sport. So I thought we had to walk that line, and I think our producer Brian Boyle, our director Jeff Nelson, and Booger specifically really did a nice job of that. We had some explainer videos, like what is a field goal, how tall are the goalposts, how do you score points, like basic stuff like that, and then also introducing some of the characters. Not Toy Story characters, but sports characters. So like Bijan Robinson was playing in that game. Trevor Lawrence was playing in that game. And part of the reason we love sports and something that we all get attached to is the storytelling aspect. And the biggest part of storytelling is the character. So teaching people about the people they were seeing and then would eventually see in live action, right? When they're not animated in Andy's room anymore. That's a huge way you can get somebody to fall in love with sports. So I'm sure there was a lot of stuff in there where people were like, why are you telling me I need 10 yards for a first down? I know that. But I also think people were open to it and understood what we were trying to do, which I guess was kind of tough because we were sort of trying to do multiple things, but I think we struck the right balance. And ultimately it came down to having fun and doing it in a cool way. So like the first and 10 marker was Slinky Dog, which is a character in Toy Story. And like there's a penalty. Slinky Dog is like throwing that thing in reverse and backing up, and then the ball was spotted by the claw, the magic claw, which the aliens view as like a deity. So there are a lot of ways that we incorporated Toy Story to make it a fun way to explain it to someone who doesn't know the rules, but is still interesting for somebody who does. I think was kind of the goal.
What do you think the future is of these kind of broadcasts? Because we're seeing them more and more often. Do you think eventually maybe we have a full season of it?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that right now because I just got back from LA, and I spoke on a panel at it's a thing called SEG. It stands for Sports Entertainment and Gaming. It's like a conference for people who are innovating and a lot of buzzwords being thrown around in the auditorium, like suss out, flesh out, hoodie envelope, all that stuff, like the business ease. So I got to speak on that panel with some people from ESPN who really made the show happen. And we did announce that we're going to do another Big City Greens hockey game that's coming up next month. And so the details on that will come out soon. So like teams and where it's going to be played in real life and, what's going to be different from the first one. One thing that one of my bosses said to me after the Toy Story game is it's such a big investment to put this show on. It doesn't really make sense to only do it once, I think. And what he meant by that is like, we've invested in this technology. We might as well use it again. Like that.
Right.
That's sort of how I interpreted it. I would love to continue to do it. I think part of the reason that the Nickelodeon shows do so well and the Toy Story seem to be a big success is the novelty of it. So I'm curious to see how that changes if we're doing it multiple times. But I also think, as it pertains to Toy Story specifically, this is kind of in the weeds here, but when we did that game, the writer's strike had just ended, I think, or the actor's strike. I got confused with all the details, but I sort of think that hamstrung what we could do. If you go back and watch the NHL game at Big City Greens, we actually spoke with the characters in the show in real time, and we had the voice actors joining us from Burbank. We were in Bristol, they're in Burbank, but we were like conversing with them. So imagine if we could do a Toy Story game and like Tom Hanks joins the show and he's Woody and telling us about it. And Woody can play in the game. Like all that stuff is really exciting. So I think there's a lot of actually room for us to grow in that respect.
Well, we talked to Mike Tirico a couple of days ago, and I asked him if he's got 2026 circled on his calendar for NBC. I know ESPN has a Super Bowl coming up soon on ABC. So, maybe Andy will host the Super Bowl one day. Interesting. Just something to keep in mind. But transitioning
that would
from
be
football,
awesome, dude.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd reach quite a wide audience doing that, like you already have, and like the Nickelodeon game probably will this year with your friend Noah on the call. And we're actually talking to Noah a little later on, so I might as well ask you this now. But you got to give me at least one thing that we should ask Noah that would make him say, "Wait, how the heck does Jack know that?"
That is a good question. Noah and I were roommates in college. Noah beat me out for every position when we were students, which I obviously hated in the moment, but looking back on it was actually one of the best things for us. I think, what's cool about our class is those guys are still my best friends in the world. And you know how it is, Jack. I mean, when you're at Syracuse, there's a finite number of games and only a couple people can call every game. So there's a chance that it can get competitive in a negative way. I think we were competitive in a positive way. Like we really pushed each other and we're still super tight. And I think Noah's leadership and maturity in that time is the biggest reason why. So saying that nice stuff about him, let me give you some ammo for the interview.
Okay, good.
Some of my core memories of hanging out with Noah in college were having number one kitchen delivered to our house on Ackerman Ave and watching sports
Ackerman
together.
Right now, nice.
Attaboy.
I guess I just revealed that to all of Central New York, but oh well.
Now you're gonna get some eggs thrown at your house if you like make the wrong pick or have a bad take or something.
I guess
but
so.
we lived on Ackerman and we ordered a lot of food. And the thing with Noah is he will deny this, but he's one of the pickiest eaters in the world. He never cooks. He doesn't eat leftovers. And
wow.
I don't think he's ever eaten a salad or drank coffee. I think
no coffee.
It is a bizarre choice from him. The leftovers thing is the weirdest one to me. Like, because if you get number one kitchen, I would hope you're going to have some leftovers, but he's like, no, won't do it. So he'll toss out, like, he could feed an entire country with all the orange chicken and General Tso's chicken that Noah Eagle threw out in college. So make sure you ask him about that.
Okay, I will. I mean, I could argue that some foods are better as leftovers. Cold pizza is better, in my opinion. I like Tully's leftovers a lot. I just got a thumbs up from our producer, Audrey, and she approves. So one thing we talked to Greg Papa earlier yesterday, class of '84 at Syracuse, and he was a guy that when you talk to Syracuse broadcasters, a lot of them say, Greg Papa was the guy we all looked up to. We wanted to be just like him. He got an NBA job right out of school. when you were in school, were there a couple of guys that you were saying, oh, man, this is the standard right here. I want to be just like this.
First of all, dude, I you keep name dropping these people you talk to. It's making me feel like an absolute bum. Like Nate Burleson, Scott Hansen, Mike Tirico, Greg Papa, Noah Eagle. Geez, like, we got to wrap this up. So make some more time for the people they actually want to hear from. When I was in school, and I think this is like a Syracuse success story in terms of what differentiates Newhouse from everybody else. I'm looking at you, Arizona State, Ball State, Northwestern, Mizzou. Like I don't even think there's a
Shots
debate,
fired.
and I'm happy. I'm happy to fire those shots, and I will live with the consequences. I'm going to give them your address in Syracuse on Ackerman
Oh,
Avenue that they can
thank
all
you.
go to.
Well, they can just listen to
Yeah,
this show and figure it out.
yeah, they can TP you. But when I got to Syracuse, I actually wanted to be a writer. I grew up, reading Grantland. I got a chance to meet Bill Simmons the other day at a Celtics game, which was really neat. Like he's
That's
my
awesome.
hero in sports
Yeah.
media. And so I loved Grantland. I loved like PTI and Around the Horn, and those shows are all writers giving their opinions. So that's what I wanted to do. So I got to Syracuse. I still remember sending a long LinkedIn message to the guy who was the sports editor of the Daily Orange. And I was super professional, like Mr. I think his name was
Yep.
DeBrazio or something. And I remember Mr. blah, blah, blah. And he's like, bro, I'm in college, like cool it with that. So I really wanted to be a writer when I got to school. And then I, went to some general interest meetings, went to the WAER meeting, met Jay Alter, who was the sports director when I was a
Right.
freshman, actually outside Dennis Denninger's office. That's kind of a crazy story, like a stroke of
That's
luck.
wild.
Jay told me that he ran from Drumlin's to DD's office in Falk, and he was wearing like thong sandals. So I don't know what he was talking about. You can't you can't run from Drumlin's to Falk, and it was not the summer in Syracuse. So I don't know
And
what he's
I
talking
was going to
about.
say, there's probably only 5 days in the year in Syracuse you can actually wear
Yeah.
sandals. So the story is flawed right off the bat.
Yeah, but he ended up there somehow. So I met him, and he's like, "Oh, you're a freshman, cool. Come to our general interest meeting." So anyway, I kind of fell in love with the radio thing and tried the TV thing and sort of liked it, but I never thought I would do play by play until I met Jason Benetti, who's was the voice of the White Sox, now the voice of the Tigers, was with ESPN for a while, now with Fox, and to me is as good as it gets in our business and play by play. Met him, and I was like, I don't think it's for me. And he's like, just try it. Just give it a shot. Like go into a studio or a study room or something, find an old NBA broadcast and just announce it like you're on the radio. And so that's what I did at Sadler Hall. I went into a study hall or a study room, and I opened up, like I found a bootleg broadcast on YouTube of a Warriors game. I fired up GarageBand and I just spoke into my laptop, and it was the worst thing ever. Like I still have some of those tapes of the worst things ever. But I'd send them to Jason, and he would give me a few notes and say, do it again. And we would just do that every week, sometimes multiple times a week for basically the whole time I was in college. And by the time that I got cleared at WAER, which, as you know, Jack, takes a couple of years to get cleared to do play by play. And again, I think that's one of the reasons Syracuse is what it is because they don't just throw anybody on the air until they're ready. So I felt ready by the time I called my first game for real on WAER. And it just goes to show like the alumni network at Syracuse. And you're seeing it this week, especially in Vegas. Like people are so willing to help each other. And to me, that's one of the things that sets us apart.
The amount of people that have walked by and say, go Orange, go Cuse. Oh, you went to Syracuse, so did I. Like it is definitely really cool to see here. A couple more questions for you, Drew. I'm probably the only person, I can guarantee I'm the only person at Radio Row that is going to talk about lacrosse right now. But you calling college lacrosse and PLL coming up soon this spring, what are you excited about for the lacrosse season?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm going to sound like a homer, but I actually think if I were just an objective observer of college lacrosse, I think one of the biggest stories is the Cuse right now, right? I mean, one of the biggest
Let's
stories
go,
in
baby.
lacrosse.
Back to the mountaintop, baby.
Syracuse might be back. I mean, the haters are going to be furious. The haters and doubters will not
Oh,
want
you
to hear
said it
this,
right
but
there. Syracuse is back.
Syracuse could be back. Now I know it's not like we're beating, Duke and Virginia yet, but the early returns on this offense are extremely positive. I love that Gary Gate is back in a suit on the sideline. None of
Uh-huh.
that casual BS from last year. He's back in a suit. This is a business journey from February
Yes.
to hopefully Memorial Day, and the team
He's a
looks amazing.
CEO.
They've got a legit Yes, he's a CEO. They've got a legit superstar in Spallina, like a real number 22 for the first time in a long time. I'm just really fired up about that team. So I think that's the biggest story I'm watching right now. Now, allow me to do a little bit of plugging here. The PLL Championship Series is next week in the DC area. Championship Series is cool. If there are any lacrosse fans out there who haven't seen sixes, it's basically like lacrosse on Red Bull is how I describe it. There are about half as many players on the field as usual. You got 5 field players and 1 goalie per team. No face-offs after goals, 30-second shot clock. When somebody scores, the goalie just spoons it out of the net, hits a teammate, and they run the other way. It's like basketball. It's fast-paced. It's super fun. There are 4 teams going there. It's like a round robin. Like people are going to camp and playing in a lacrosse tournament. That's kind of what it feels like. And then on Saturday, so the 17th, we have a women's all-star game. It's called the Unleashed game, and it's the same format. Best players in the world. Charlotte North will be there. And so we are fired up about that. So PLL, get a little taste now. This is a little appetizer. And then in the summer, make sure you watch the full season.
Charlotte North is the greatest women's lacrosse player I've ever seen in my life. She is so exciting to watch.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's also wicked cool. Like I'm actually calling a game with her this weekend. We're doing the Clemson Davidson game together. So make sure you watch that one. Also, the best lacrosse game I've ever seen, Jack, was BC North Carolina, the championship a couple of years ago. Charlotte's last game in college, insane. The stands were packed. It was at Homewood Field in Baltimore, which is I think the best venue for the sport, aside from the Dome when they get it rocking. But Homewood Field, it was so cool. Stands were packed, and you got the best player ever on the floor on the field against maybe the best team ever in that Carolina season.
Right.
So if you've never seen that game, I think the full replay is on YouTube. It'd be a good way to like get an introduction to lacrosse if you've never seen it.
Yes. I will slot that as number 2 because the greatest game, in my opinion, we're getting into the weeds here in lacrosse. 2009 Syracuse men's lacrosse national championship against Cornell. Yeah, Cody Jamieson on the game winner. That's my bread and butter right there.
Yeah, yep.
Well,
Central New York is orange. The nation is orange. I remember all that.
Yes, exactly. You're 100% right. All right. Final question for you. We've asked everybody this so far. When it comes to flip night, we need your strategy. What is it?
Oh, that's such a great question to ask everybody. I saw Tarico said he's a tails guy, right? Is that true?
He's tails. Tails never fails for him. Some people have said heads every time. Some people have said Beth Mowens told us, I think yesterday, tails first and then get a feel for it. I'm an every other guy. Whatever I see last at the bar, I pick the opposite one. I'm playing the math. What is it for you?
I don't know if you understand how math works there, Jack. Luckily, you're a broadcast major. You're not. The law of averages does not apply here, but I see what you're doing. My strategy, the beauty is I never even had to make a call because I actually knew one of the bartenders really well. We worked a different job together. So I won every flip. I was 100%. So you like math. How's that math for you?
Really 100%. Good at guessing, I guess. You're just really good at guessing. Well,
yeah.
Drew, we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, man. I hope everything else is going well.